My mom called and told me I had 48 hours to get out of my inherited house because, according to her, it now belonged to my sister. I stayed quiet. I did not scream. I did not beg. I did not waste my breath trying to explain the law to people who had already decided that my pain did not matter. Instead, I hung up the phone, opened my files, and began gathering every legal document I had. Because when they finally showed up at the house with a moving truck, ready to take what my grandmother had left me, the police were already waiting for them. I thought I had built a life strong enough that my family could no longer shake it. I was a successful attorney in Boston, a woman who spent her days fighting for people on the edge of losing their homes. I knew courtrooms. I knew property law. I knew how to stand in front of powerful people and not flinch. But nothing prepared me for the sound of my mother's voice on that phone call. "You have 48 hours to get your things out," she said. "That house is your sister's now." For a moment, I could not breathe. That house was not just any house. It was the house my grandmother, Elaine Warren, had left specifically to me in her will. Not to the family. Not to my parents. Not to my sister. To May. My mother spoke as if my grandmother's wishes were nothing more than an inconvenience. As if the signed will, the deed, the years of love stitched into every room meant absolutely nothing. And in that silence after her words, I felt something inside me crack. But I did not argue. They had no idea what was coming. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you need to understand what that house meant to me. It sits on a quiet street in the suburbs of Boston, with a wraparound porch, blue shutters, and a giant maple tree in the front yard. My grandmother and I painted those shutters together when I was 12. I still remember standing barefoot on an old drop cloth, the smell of paint in the summer air, Grandma Elaine laughing as I accidentally brushed a blue streak across my cheek. The house was built in 1920. It has original hardwood floors that creak in familiar places, a grand staircase I used to slide down as a child, and a kitchen with a bay window overlooking a garden that bursts with peonies every spring. But its beauty was not the reason I loved it. That house was the only place where I ever felt completely safe. While my parents were busy climbing corporate ladders, attending charity dinners, joining country clubs, and measuring life through achievements, Grandma Elaine raised me in every way that mattered. Every summer, most weekends, and every school break I could manage were spent under that roof. The smell of apple pie would drift through the kitchen before I even dropped my backpack by the door. Her laughter would echo through the hallways. Her hands, weathered from years of gardening and work, would pull me into a hug that never felt rushed, never felt conditional, never felt like something I had to earn. "A woman must know how to take care of herself," she used to say. She taught me how to fix a leaky faucet, how to reset a circuit breaker, how to patch drywall, how to change a tire, and how to cook a Thanksgiving dinner from scratch without losing my mind. I remember standing beside her at the kitchen sink, my hands too small around the wrench, while she guided me patiently. "Don't force it, Cher," she said. "Understand how it works first, then use your strength." She was talking about the faucet, but years later, I realized she had also been talking about life. By the time I was 15, I could do things most adults still called someone else to handle. And every time I learned something new, my grandmother looked at me as if I had just moved mountains. The garden was her sanctuary, and she made it ours. We spent hours kneeling in the soil, tending vegetables and flowers, our knees dirty, our hands stained, the sun warming our backs. She taught me the difference between annuals and perennials, how to prune roses without hurting them, how to tell whether a plant needed water or patience. "Life comes back, Cher," she told me once, pressing a bulb into my palm. "If you give it the right conditions to thrive." I was too young then to understand how deeply those words would follow me. When I got accepted to law school, she turned the sunroom into a study space for me. She moved her plants closer to the windows, brought in an old wooden desk, and placed a lamp beside it, because she said every serious woman needed a good reading light. I prepared for the bar exam there, surrounded by her ferns and violets, drinking the tea she brought me in chipped floral mugs. On nights when I was overwhelmed, she would come in quietly, place a hand on my shoulder, and say, "You belong in every room you're brave enough to enter." She believed in me when no one else did. She saw something in me that my own parents never bothered to look for. My parents, Nancy and Harold Warren, were very different. To them, success had always been something you could point to, count, display, and compare. My mother had perfectly styled hair, a calendar full of luncheons, and a habit of smiling in public while cutting with precision in private. She had mapped out my life before I was old enough to know I had one. My father was colder, distant, critical. Parenting, to him, seemed like another business arrangement. Invest resources, expect results, withdraw approval when the return disappointed him. When I chose public service law instead of corporate law, their disappointment was immediate and obvious. "All that education wasted," my mother said. My father only looked at me over his glasses and asked how I expected to build a meaningful future helping people who could not afford to pay me properly. Then there was my younger sister, Stephanie. She was 4 years younger than me and far more willing to follow the path our parents laid out. She went to the business school they chose. She married the man they approved of. She wore the right clothes, joined the right clubs, smiled at the right events, and never questioned their authority in any meaningful way. While I fought for independence, she leaned into their control. And because of that, she became the daughter they always wanted. When Grandma Elaine passed away 3 years ago, the will was clear. The house was mine. I remember sitting in the attorney's office when the will was read. The room felt too still. The walls seemed too white. I was grieving so hard I could barely focus. But when the attorney read that my grandmother had left the house to me, something warm and unbearable moved through my chest. Grief and gratitude collided. She had known. She had known what that house meant to me. She had known I was the one who spent weekends helping her maintain it when arthritis made climbing the stairs painful. I was the one who drove her to appointments, cleaned the gutters, replanted the garden beds, carried laundry baskets up and down those creaking stairs, and sat with her in the kitchen when she was too tired to cook, but too proud to say she needed help. My parents were visibly displeased. My mother's lips tightened. My father's jaw hardened. Stephanie stared down at her lap as if the decision embarrassed her. But the will was ironclad. Grandma Elaine had consulted an attorney, signed everything properly, and left no room for confusion. Along with the house, she left me a letter. I still keep it in my desk drawer. This house has sheltered 4 generations of strong women. Now it will shelter you, my dear Cher, as you continue to forge your own path. I had read that letter so many times the paper had softened at the folds. Even though the house was mine, I kept my apartment closer to downtown Boston. My office was there, and the commute from the suburbs would have been brutal. My caseload as a public interest attorney was demanding. Long hours, emergency filings, families facing eviction, elderly tenants being pushed out by developers, single parents fighting landlords who hoped they would give up. Still, I never neglected the house. I visited regularly. I paid the taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance. I kept the garden alive. I repaired what needed repairing. I protected it exactly as my grandmother would have wanted. I had plans to move in eventually. Maybe when my career became more flexible. Maybe when I started a family of my own. Maybe when the pace of my life slowed enough for me to wake up under that roof every morning. But I never considered selling it. Not once. Developers had made offers. Good offers. The property was valuable, and the neighborhood was changing fast. But every time an envelope arrived or someone left a business card in the mailbox, I threw it away. That house was not an asset to me. It was the physical form of the only unconditional love I had ever known. It was home in the truest sense of the word. My parents never understood that. It's just a house, my mother would say whenever I mentioned fixing the porch railing or planting new lavender along the walkway. You could sell it and buy something more practical. To them, everything had a price tag. Everything could be converted into money, status, convenience, or leverage. The idea that something could be priceless because of memory, history, and love was foreign to them. I worked my way through college and law school with loans, scholarships, and part-time jobs. Stephanie's education was fully funded by our parents. When I graduated with honors, my parents attended the ceremony, took a few photos, and left early for a business dinner. When I won my first major case, protecting a group of elderly tenants from illegal eviction, my father called it small time compared to the corporate mergers Stephanie helped facilitate in finance. The divide between us widened over the years. Holiday dinners became exercises in restraint. I sat through thinly veiled criticisms, comparisons, and reminders that my choices were strange, difficult, or disappointing. Still, I stayed in contact, because that was what family did. Or so I believed. I never imagined they would go this far. I never believed they would try to take the one thing that mattered most to me. But there are depths to family betrayal you do not see until someone you love hands you the knife and expects you to thank them for it. It was a Friday evening when my phone rang. I had just returned home from court after a long week fighting for a family facing foreclosure. My feet hurt. My shoulders were tight. My briefcase was still hanging from my arm when I saw my mother's name on the caller ID. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But old habits are hard to break. Some part of me still believed I owed her an answer. So I picked up. Sure. We need to discuss the house, she said. No hello. No how are you. No soft entry. Just that clipped, business-like tone she used when a decision had already been made, and my participation was merely ceremonial. What about it, I asked, slipping off my heels and sinking onto the couch. Your sister needs a place to live. As you know, her divorce was finalized last month, and she can't afford to stay in their house. Your father and I have decided that she and Amanda will move into your grandmother's house. I sat up straight. The exhaustion vanished from my body, replaced by a cold rush of adrenaline. What do you mean you've decided? I asked slowly. That house belongs to me. Grandma left it to me in her will. Don't be difficult, my mother snapped. You don't even live there. It's sitting empty while your sister and your niece have nowhere to go. Family helps family. I'm not being difficult, Mom. I'm stating a fact. The house is legally mine. I pay the taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance. I can't just give it away. We aren't asking you to give it away, she said, her voice rising. We're telling you the family needs to redistribute assets based on current needs. Stephanie has a child to consider. What do you have? A career that keeps you too busy to even use the house? The implication landed like a slap. Because I did not have a child, my needs mattered less. Because I was independent, I could be sacrificed. Because I had learned to survive without them, they assumed I did not need anything at all. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Has Stephanie looked for apartments? I asked. Has she considered downsizing? There are options besides taking my house. Your father has already spoken with Martin, she said, referring to our family attorney. There are provisions in your grandmother's will that we can challenge. Provisions about the property being used as a primary residence, which you are not doing. That was a lie. I knew the will. I had read it more times than I could count. There were no such provisions. Grandma had left the house to me unconditionally. Mom, that's not true, I said. The will is clear. The house is mine without conditions. Don't tell me what is and isn't true, Cher. Her voice rose into that sharp, shrill pitch that signaled the end of any reasonable conversation. You've always been selfish, she continued, always thinking about yourself instead of the family. Your sister needs this house for her and Amanda. You have 48 hours to get any personal items you want out of there. After that, Stephanie is moving in. Before I could respond, I heard my father's voice in the background. He must have been listening on another extension. Sure, this isn't up for debate, he said. The decision has been made. Stephanie needs the house more than you do. This is about doing what's right for the family. But Dad, this isn't legal. You can't just decide to give away my property. We can and we have, he replied coldly. Martin is drawing up the papers now. If you fight this, you will only be hurting your sister and your niece. Is that really what you want? To deprive a child of a stable home because you're clinging to sentiment? The manipulation was so obvious, and yet, for one brief moment, it still worked. Was I being selfish? Was I putting memories above a child? Was I becoming the cold, unfeeling person they always accused me of being? Then I looked across my apartment at the framed photo on my bookshelf. Grandma Elaine standing in her garden, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun, smiling like she knew exactly who she was. No, this was not about selfishness. This was about justice. This was about honoring my grandmother's wishes. This was about standing up for myself in a family that had always expected me to make myself smaller. I need to speak with Martin directly, I said. He's away for the weekend, my father replied too quickly. The papers will be ready on Monday, but Stephanie needs to move in sooner. Your mother already told you. 48 hours. Be reasonable for once in your life. The call ended abruptly. I sat there staring at my phone, the silence in my apartment pressing against me. Minutes later, the screen lit up again. A text from Stephanie. I know this is hard for you, but I really need this right now. Amanda and I have nowhere else to go. Mom and Dad said you never use the house anyway. I promise I'll take good care of it. I can help you move your stuff this weekend if you want. The false sympathy made my blood boil. Not because she was desperate. Not because she was hurting. But because every word assumed this was already done. As if my consent was a formality. As if my grief, my memories, my legal rights were obstacles to be politely stepped around. I tried calling Martin's office, but it was closed for the weekend. I called his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. Either he really was unavailable, or my parents had made sure I could not reach him. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by case files and legal briefs, feeling more alone than I had in years. The betrayal was not just that they wanted the house. It was how easily they dismissed me. How quickly they decided Stephanie's crisis gave them permission to erase my grandmother's final wishes. How naturally they returned to the family pattern where Stephanie needed, my parents commanded, and I was expected to sacrifice. But as the shock began to fade, something else rose in its place. Determination. I was a lawyer. I specialized in housing rights. If anyone should know how to protect a home, it was me. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would not go quietly. I would not hand over my grandmother's legacy because my parents raised their voices. I would not be bullied out of the only place that had ever truly loved me back. The clock was ticking. 48 hours. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. As a lawyer who worked in housing rights every day, I knew exactly what my family was attempting to do. It was illegal. Completely illegal. There was no gray area. No hidden loophole. No magical family exception that allowed parents to reassign property because one child needed it more than another. The house was mine, fair and square, regardless of whatever fictional residency requirement my parents had invented. But I also knew something else. Family disputes could become complicated quickly. Not because the law was unclear, but because people who felt entitled to something often behaved as if possession itself created rights. If they got Stephanie inside that house, if they moved furniture in, changed utilities, received mail there, and started calling it her residence, removing her could turn into a messy legal battle. I could not let that happen, so I worked through the night. At my kitchen table, with my laptop open and cold coffee beside me, I reviewed every document connected to the property. The deed, the will, property tax records, insurance policies, maintenance receipts, utility records, correspondence from my grandmother's attorney. Everything. I created a digital folder and organized it chronologically, building a case file with the same precision I used for clients in court. Only this time, the client was me. At midnight, I emailed Jackie, a colleague and friend who specialized in estate law. I explained the situation, attached the key documents, and asked for her professional opinion. By 1 in the morning, she responded. Her message was short, clear, and exactly what I needed. They have no legal ground, none, but do not let them enter or move in. If they establish physical possession, this could become much more difficult than it needs to be. Don't let them get a foot in the door, literally. I stared at that sentence for a long moment. Then I nodded to myself. By 2 in the morning, I had a strategy mapped out. Not a vague plan, a precise one. Every hour mattered. Every action had to be taken before they realized I was not going to fold. First thing Saturday morning, I called a locksmith that advertised emergency weekend services. I explained that I was the homeowner and needed all locks changed immediately due to security concerns. I scheduled the appointment for 9 and paid the urgent service fee without hesitation. Next, I called a security company a former client had recommended. They specialized in rapid installation, cameras, motion alerts, and remote monitoring. They could install a basic system by Saturday afternoon. Then I called Thomas, a friend from college who had become a police officer in the suburb where Grandma's house was located. I explained everything. The call from my parents, the threats, the moving deadline, the false legal claims. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Cher, I'll be there. Send me the documents. If they show up and try to force entry, we'll handle it properly." With the immediate security issues addressed, I moved to the legal side. I drafted a cease and desist letter to my parents and Stephanie, clearly stating my ownership and my refusal to grant access or possession. I also prepared an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order that I could file Monday morning if necessary. By noon on Saturday, I was driving to my grandmother's house with several storage bins in the back of my car. I had no intention of surrendering the house, but I was not going to risk Grandma's most precious belongings falling into the hands of people who clearly did not respect her wishes. As I pulled into the driveway, relief washed through me. No one from my family was there. The house stood quietly beneath the spring sunlight. The maple tree swayed in the breeze. The garden was beginning to bloom, just as it did every year. For a moment, I just sat in the car and looked at it. Grief came back like a wave. Not only grief for my grandmother, but grief for the family I thought I had. The family I kept making excuses for. The family I had kept trying to understand. How could they do this? How could they try to take the one place where I had been loved without performance, without conditions, without having to prove I deserved it? The locksmith arrived right on time, and within an hour every exterior door had a new lock. I chose a keypad entry system for the front door so I could control access remotely and track entries. The side and back doors received new deadbolts with keys only I possessed. The security team arrived shortly after. They installed cameras at every entry point and in the main living areas. The system sent alerts directly to my phone. I could check live feeds from anywhere. They also installed linked smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, giving me peace of mind that the house would be safe even when I was not there. While they worked, I packed the things I could not bear to lose. Grandma's wedding ring, the pearl necklace she wore to church and family celebrations, photo albums documenting 4 generations of women who had laughed, suffered, cooked, prayed, argued, survived, and started over inside those walls. The hand-quilted blanket she made when I was born. Her first edition books, the ones she used to read aloud to me while rain tapped against the windows. The wooden box filled with every letter I had written to her during college and law school. Each item carried a memory. Each one reminded me of who she had been. Strong, gentle, honest, steady. Never let anyone diminish your light, she used to tell me. Stand your ground when you know you're right. As I wrapped her pearl necklace in tissue paper, I could almost hear her saying it again. By late afternoon, the security system was fully operational. I had installed the mobile app, created my account, tested the cameras, checked the sensors, and learned how to lock and unlock the front door remotely. Just as I was getting ready to leave, my phone rang. Stefania. I stared at her name for a second before answering. Hey, she said lightly, as if we were discussing lunch plans. I'm thinking of coming by tomorrow morning to start measuring for curtains and furniture placement. Would 9 work for you? Her tone was so casual that it almost stunned me more than anger would have. This was my house, and she was speaking as if she had already chosen paint colors. I'm not going to be there tomorrow, I replied evenly. And I think we need to discuss this situation further before any plans are made. What is there to discuss? She said. Mom and Dad already told you what's happening. I need the house. You don't. It's simple. The entitlement in her voice was breathtaking. Nothing about this is simple, Stephanie. The house is legally mine. Grandma left it to me for a reason. Only because you were her favorite, she snapped. There it was. The soft, wounded sister act disappeared, and beneath it was the resentment she had apparently been carrying for years. You always got special treatment from her, Stephanie continued. And now you're going to deny my daughter a home out of spite. Real mature, sure. This isn't about favoritism or spite, I said. It's about respecting Grandma's wishes and the legal reality of property ownership. You can't just take someone's house because you want it. Watch me, she said. Then she hung up. I stood in the entryway of my grandmother's house, and took a long breath. That conversation only strengthened my resolve. This house was more than wood, brick, and glass. It was a symbol of the love my grandmother had poured into me. It was proof that someone in my family had seen me clearly, had chosen me, had trusted me to carry something forward. I would not let it be stolen through guilt, lies, and bullying. As I locked the front door with my new keys, an unexpected calm settled over me. For years, I had tried to earn my parents' approval. I had accepted their criticism as if it were truth. I had wondered what was wrong with me because loving me always seemed so difficult for them. But this situation made something painfully clear. Their behavior was not my fault, and I did not have to accept it anymore. The 48-hour deadline still loomed, but I was ready. Let them come, I thought. Let them try. I had the law on my side, and for once in my life, I was not going to back down. Saturday evening, my phone began buzzing almost constantly. Stephanie sent a series of texts with photos of furniture, curtains, paint swatches, and decor ideas for what she called her new house. Each message felt deliberate. Each one assumed my silence meant surrender. Thinking of painting the living room sage green. What do you think? Do you still have Grandma's dining table? Amanda and I won't need something that big. But maybe we could put it in storage. Mom said you might want the china cabinet. Let me know if you do. Otherwise, we can sell it. I stared at that last message for a long time. Sell it. The dining table where I had done my homework every afternoon while Grandma prepared dinner. The china cabinet that held her depression glass, each piece with a story she had carefully told me while I stood beside her, pretending to be bored but secretly memorizing every word. They were discussing selling my grandmother's treasures as if they already owned them. The audacity was breathtaking. I did not respond. Engaging would make it seem as if this was a negotiation. And it was not. The house and everything in it belonged to me. Around 8 that night, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. Then a third time. I answered. Why aren't you responding to your sister's messages? She demanded. Hello to you too, Mom, I said, keeping my voice flat. Don't be childish. Stephanie needs your help planning the move. The least you could do is cooperate. There isn't going to be a move, I said. The house is mine. I have no intention of giving it to Stephanie. Silence. Then my mother scoffed. So you're going to fight us on this after everything we've done for you? The irony of that statement nearly made me laugh. Everything they had done for me? My education, which I paid for myself? My career, which they dismissed? My achievements, which were never enough? I'm not fighting anyone, I replied. I'm stating a fact. The house is mine legally and rightfully. Stephanie is in a difficult situation, but taking my house is not the solution. Your house? She repeated with disdain. You act as if you built it brick by brick. That house has been in the family for generations. It should go to the person who needs it most right now. And that person is your sister. That's not how property ownership works, Mom. Grandma left the house to me in her will. That was her decision to make. She made that decision because she didn't know Stephanie would end up divorced with a child to support, my mother snapped. Circumstances change, Sheer. Family adapts. Why are you being so selfish? There it was again. Selfish. The word my family always used when I set a boundary. For years, that word had worked. It made me question myself. It made me shrink. It made me choose their comfort over my own peace. Not this time. I'm not having this conversation anymore, I said firmly. The house is not available for Stephanie. She needs to find another solution. Your father wants to speak with you. Before I could object, his voice came on the line. Cher, listen to me. That tone. Calm. Authoritative. Final. The tone he had used throughout my childhood whenever he wanted obedience disguised as reason. I've spoken with Martin, he said, and we've found precedent for contesting the will based on your grandmother's mental state in her final months. My hand tightened around the phone. That is absolutely false, I said. And you know it. Grandma was sharp until the end. Her doctors would confirm that. Her bridge partners would confirm that. The volunteers at the library would confirm that. You're threatening to slander her memory to get your way. That is low, even for you. I'm not threatening anything, he replied coldly. I'm telling you what will happen if you continue to be unreasonable. Fighting this will be expensive, time-consuming, and embarrassing for everyone involved. Is that really what you want? To drag the family through a legal battle that destroys relationships permanently? You seem to be confusing me with someone intimidated by legal proceedings, I said. The lawyer in me had fully taken over. I'm not, Dad. I know exactly what would happen if you tried to contest the will, and it would not go the way you think. But you are right about one thing. This situation is destroying relationships, just not in the way you're implying. Sunday morning brought a new wave of pressure. My father sent an email with an attached document claiming to be a family agreement regarding the temporary reassignment of the house to Stephanie. The document was amateur at best, legally ridiculous at worst. It had vague language, no enforceable basis, no proper legal structure, and all the confidence of a man who was used to having his words treated like law. By midday, extended family members had been pulled into the mess. My mother's sister called to tell me I should do the right thing for Stephanie and Amanda. My father's brother texted that he was disappointed in my lack of family loyalty. Cousins I had not spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about what should happen with my grandmother's house. It was a coordinated campaign. Phone calls, texts, guilt, shame, accusations. But what they did not understand was that each message only made me more certain. These were the same tactics that had made me feel small and powerless when I was a child. But I was not a child anymore. I was an adult, a lawyer, a homeowner, and I knew my rights. At 3 that afternoon, my apartment doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed on my phone and saw my parents and Stephanie standing downstairs. With Amanda, my 5-year-old niece. Of course they brought her. I buzzed them up, already preparing myself. When they entered my apartment, I understood their strategy instantly. My mother wore the wounded expression she used when she wanted everyone to see her as the injured party. My father carried a folder, likely filled with more meaningless documents. Stephanie held Amanda's hand, using her own child as a shield before anyone had even spoken. We wanted to talk in person, my mother said, as if this were a normal family visit. Clear the air before tomorrow. There is nothing to clear, I replied. I did not invite them to sit. The house is not available for Stephanie. She needs to make other arrangements. Amanda looked up at me with wide eyes. Aunt Cher, are we going to live in the house with the big tree swing? The question hit me harder than I wanted it to. She was innocent. She had no idea she had been coached. Before I could answer, Stephanie said, Yes, sweetie. The house great-grandma wanted us to have. The lie was so blatant that heat rushed to my face. But I kept my composure. Amanda, honey, I said gently, would you like to watch something on my tablet while the grown-ups talk? I handed her my tablet with a child-friendly app open. She happily took it to the couch, removing herself from the center of their manipulation. Stephanie's eyes narrowed. That was unnecessary. What is unnecessary, I said, is using a child as an emotional weapon. My mother gasped. How dare you? No, I said, turning to all 3 of them. How dare you? This is not going to work. Not the guilt trips, not the threats, not the family pressure campaign. The house is mine, legally and morally. I will not be bullied into giving it up. We are not bullying you, my father insisted, opening his folder. We are trying to reach a reasonable solution to a family crisis. Stephanie has nowhere to go, my mother added. That is not true, I replied. She has options. Apartments, smaller homes, temporary rentals, your guest house. Boston has housing available in multiple price ranges. It may not be her dream solution, but that does not make my house available. Do you hear yourself? My mother said. Suggesting your sister and niece live in some cramped apartment when there is a perfectly good house sitting empty? A house that belongs to me, I said. My home, my property, my decision. Stephanie's face twisted. Your selfishness is unbelievable. You don't even use the house. You just keep it like some shrine because Grandma loved you best. Meanwhile, my daughter and I could actually make it a home. The way you make everything about you is remarkable, Stephanie, I said, keeping my voice calm. This is not about who Grandma loved more. It is about respecting her wishes and recognizing legal reality. You cannot take what does not belong to you. My father slid a document across my counter. This is a formal notice of our intent to challenge the will if you do not cooperate. Martin has already begun the paperwork. I glanced at it. No official letterhead. No attorney signature. No legal substance. A bluff. A bad one. This is not worth the paper it is printed on, I said, sliding it back. And if Martin is actually involved in this scheme, he should know better. Attempting to defraud me of my property could create serious professional consequences for him. You're threatening our family attorney now? My mother asked. I'm stating facts, I corrected. Just as I am stating the fact that the house is mine, will remain mine, and is not available for Stephanie to move into tomorrow or any other day, the tension in the room became almost physical. My father's face turned red, the way it always did when someone questioned his authority. My mother looked ready to cry, a tactic that had worked on me for most of my childhood. Stephanie glared with open hostility. Finally, my father gathered his papers. This is not over, he said. Be prepared for what comes next. I'm always prepared, I replied. Are you? After they left, taking a confused Amanda with them, I leaned against the closed door and let myself breathe. The confrontation had been exhausting, but it had also clarified everything. There would be no peaceful family conversation, no reasonable compromise, no sudden recognition of my pain. They were committed to taking what was mine through any means they could get away with. The final 24 hours of their imaginary deadline were ticking away. But the house was secured. The legal documents were ready, and backup was in place. Monday would bring the climax of this family drama. And for once, I would not be the one backing down. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, almost offensively beautiful for the storm waiting beneath it. As I got ready, I checked the security feeds on my phone. The house was quiet, undisturbed. For now, I had taken the day off work, explaining to my supervisor that I was dealing with a family property dispute requiring immediate attention. As a lawyer who almost never missed work for personal reasons, my request was granted without question. By 9, I was parked down the street from Grandma's house in a spot where I could see the driveway without being immediately noticed. On the passenger seat beside me was a stack of documents. The deed, Grandma's will, the letter from her attorney confirming my unconditional ownership, the emergency restraining order I had filed first thing that morning, granted due to the clear threat of illegal entry. Toma texted at enough dues. We're nearby. Call when they arrive. The security company had also assigned a representative to monitor the cameras remotely and alert me to any activity. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. Motion detected at the front of the house. I opened the app. My father was walking around the property, peering through windows, testing door handles, moving with the irritated confidence of a man who believed locks were a personal insult. When he realized none of his keys worked, he made a phone call. His gestures became sharper. His posture stiffened. Even without audio, I could read the frustration in his body. 20 minutes later, a moving truck pulled up. Then my mother's SUV. Stephanie was in the passenger seat. My father approached them, and the three of them began arguing near the driveway. Stephanie got out, marched to the front door, shoved her key into the lock, and froze when it did not turn. This was it. I texted Thomas. Now. Then I started my car and drove to the house, pulling directly into the driveway behind the moving truck and blocking it in. When I stepped out, all three of them turned. My mother recovered first. Finally decided to show up and do the right thing, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm here to make sure the right thing happens, I replied. At that moment, Thomas's patrol car pulled up to the curb. He and his partner, Officer Rivera, got out and approached professionally. My father's expression darkened. What is going on here? Miss Warren asked us to be present while she addresses a potential trespassing situation, Thomas said. He gave no indication that we were friends. Trespassing? Stephanie scoffed. We're her family. This property belongs to Sher Warren, Officer Rivera said, referring to the documentation I had already provided. She has not granted permission for anyone to enter. This is ridiculous, my mother sputtered. Sure. Call off these officers immediately. This is a family matter. A family matter involving an attempt to illegally take possession of my property, I said. Which is why I have also filed for and received a temporary restraining order preventing any of you from entering the premises without my express written permission. I handed copies to each of them. Watching their faces change as they read the document gave me no pleasure. But it did give me clarity. You got a restraining order against your own family? Stephanie shrieked. Have you lost your mind? On the contrary, I said. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. This house belongs to me. Grandma left it to me in her will. You have no legal right to move in, regardless of what Mom and Dad told you. My father looked up from the document, eyes narrowed. This won't stand. I called Martin this morning, and he is preparing paperwork to challenge the will. Is he? I asked. I pulled out my phone. That's interesting, because I spoke with Martin myself an hour ago. Would you like to hear what he had to say? I pressed play on the recording I had legally made of my conversation with our family attorney. For the record, Mr. Harrison, I never advised the Warren family that there were grounds to contest Elaine Warren's will. The will is legally sound, and Cher Warren is the sole and rightful owner of the property at 42 Maple Street. I have not prepared, nor will I prepare, any documents challenging this fact. If Harold or Nancy Warren have claimed otherwise, they have misrepresented my professional opinion and services. The color drained from my father's face. My mother looked from him to me, then back to him. Stephanie stood completely still. For the first time, reality seemed to enter the space between us. You lied? My mother asked my father, her voice suddenly small. Martin never said we could challenge the will? He was being overly cautious, my father blustered, but the confidence had left him. There are other attorneys who would take the case. No reputable attorney would, I said. The will is ironclad. Grandma was of sound mind. The document was properly executed. There are no conditions, no provisions, and no legal mechanism that would allow you to transfer ownership under these circumstances. Stephanie's eyes filled with tears. So what now? She asked. Amanda and I have nowhere to go. We gave up our apartment. Our stuff is in this truck. For a moment, sympathy flickered inside me, because Stephanie was entitled. She had been manipulative. She had allowed herself to believe my home could become hers just because our parents said so. But she was also a mother trying to provide stability for her child. Still, her need did not erase my rights. You have options, Stephanie, I said more gently. There are short-term rentals. There are apartments. I can send you a list. But this house is not one of those options. After everything we've done for you, my mother began, returning to her favorite script. This is how you repay us? By humiliating us in front of the police? By leaving your sister and niece homeless? They are not homeless because of me, I said. They are in this situation because you promised them something that was not yours to give. You created this, not me. My father, always practical when fully cornered, finally seemed to understand that the performance was over. Let's go, he said to my mother and Stephanie. This is not the time or place. But all our stuff, Stephanie protested, gesturing at the moving truck. Then find somewhere to put it, he snapped. Come on. As they turned to leave, Officer Rivera spoke clearly. For clarity, the restraining order prohibits you from entering this property without Miss Warren's written permission. Any attempt to do so will result in immediate legal consequences. We understand, my father said stiffly. He guided Stephanie toward my mother's SUV. She was crying now, but whether from humiliation, fear, anger, or genuine regret, I could not tell. After I moved my car, the moving truck pulled away behind them. I stood in the driveway and watched them disappear around the corner. What I felt was complicated. Relief that my plan had worked. Sadness for the damage that could never fully be undone. Anger at how far they had been willing to go. But beneath all of it was something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. I had stood my ground. I had protected what was rightfully mine. I had broken free, at least for that moment, from the cycle of manipulation that had shaped my family for years. Thomas approached as Officer Rivera returned to the patrol car. You okay? He asked quietly. I looked up at Grandma's house. My house. It stood solid and unchanged, as if it had weathered the storm with me. I'm better than okay, I said. For the first time in a long time, I think I'm exactly where I need to be. As I watched my family's vehicles vanish down the street, I knew it was not truly over. There would be calls, accusations, attempts at reconciliation, more manipulation, depending on my parents' mood. But something fundamental had shifted. I had set a boundary, and I had held it. Whatever came next, I would face it with the strength my grandmother had always seen in me. I walked up the path to the front door, feeling the weight of the new keys in my hand and the strange lightness of finally standing up for myself. The days following the confrontation were filled with emotional fallout. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages came from every direction. Rage, pleading, cold disappointment, passive-aggressive concern, carefully worded accusations. My parents had apparently shared their version of the story with the extended family, painting me as the villain who left poor Stephanie and Amanda homeless out of spite. Aunt Dorothy, my mother's sister, left a voicemail that I listened to only once. I never thought I'd see the day when a Warren would turn her back on family. Your grandmother would be ashamed. The irony was almost unbearable. They were using my grandmother's name to pressure me into betraying her final wishes. My cousin Jake, whom I had once been close with, texted to ask if I was okay and whether he could hear my side. He was one of the few who asked. When I told him what had happened, he responded, "That sounds exactly like Uncle Harold and Aunt Nancy. Good for you for standing up to them." That one message meant more than he probably knew. Stephanie's messages swung between fury and desperation. You ruined everything. Hours later, another text. Please share. Just let us stay for a few months until I can save for a deposit. I maintained my position. I offered to help her look for housing. I even offered to contribute to a security deposit if she found an apartment. But the house was not available. My father tried a different tactic. He sent a formal email outlining a final offer. I would sign over the house to Stephanie in exchange for a sum of money less than half its market value. I did not respond. The house was not for sale. Not for market value. Not for double market value. Not for any amount he could write on paper. Through a mutual acquaintance, I later learned that Stephanie and Amanda had moved temporarily into my parents' guest house. So the desperate homelessness crisis they had used to justify stealing my house was not quite as dire as they had claimed. I was not surprised, but it confirmed what I already knew. A week after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Martin, the family attorney. He apologized for being pulled into the dispute and attached several documents that made my stomach turn. In the interest of transparency and professional ethics, he wrote, I feel obligated to share these communications with you. Your parents consulted me about challenging your grandmother's will not after Stephanie's divorce, as they claimed, but 3 years ago, immediately after your grandmother's passing. I refused to participate then, as I have refused now, but I believe you should be aware of their long-standing intentions. I opened the attachments with trembling hands. The emails revealed a calculated plan that had been in motion for years. My parents had been trying to find a way to recover the house from me from the moment Grandma died. They had consulted multiple attorneys. Every one of them had told them they had no case. Stephanie's divorce had not created the plan. It had merely given them a convenient excuse to execute it. I sat at my kitchen table reading through the emails, betrayal settling deeper and deeper into my bones. This had not been an impulsive decision made out of concern for Stephanie. It had been deliberate, a long-term scheme to undermine my grandmother's wishes and take back control of something she had intentionally placed beyond their reach. One email from my father to an attorney who had refused the case was especially revealing. The house has been in our family for generations. My mother's decision to leave it to share, rather than allowing us to determine its best use within the family, was short-sighted and emotionally driven. We need to correct this mistake. Correct this mistake. That was what I was to them. Not a person my grandmother loved. Not the rightful owner of the house. A mistake to be corrected. The arrogance in those words crystallized everything. This had never been about Stephanie's needs. It was about control. My parents could not accept that Grandma had made a decision they disagreed with. They could not tolerate that she had given me something valuable without their permission, approval, or influence. I forwarded the emails to Jackie and asked for her professional assessment. Her reply was blunt. This borders on conspiracy to commit fraud. If you ever wanted to escalate, you would have options. At minimum, you now have documentation that would destroy any future attempt to contest the will. The revelation left me shaken. But it also liberated me in a strange, painful way. For years, I had tried to earn my parents' approval. I had wondered if their preference for Stephanie was somehow my fault. I had questioned whether I was too stubborn, too sensitive, too difficult, too different. Now I could see the pattern clearly. Control, manipulation, conditional love. A family system where my worth depended on obedience. I decided to seek professional help. The therapist I found specialized in family trauma. Week by week, she helped me put language to things I had experienced but never fully understood. The golden child. The scapegoat. Gaslighting. Emotional blackmail. Enmeshment. The slow erosion of self-trust that happens when your reality is constantly dismissed by the people who raised you. Your grandmother seems to have been the one healthy influence in your life, my therapist said during one session. She recognized your worth. She wanted to protect you by giving you something that could not easily be taken away. By defending her gift, you are honoring not only her wishes, but the healthy love she represented. Those words stayed with me. My grandmother had been different from my parents, in every way that mattered. Where they criticized, she encouraged. Where they withheld approval, she gave love freely. Where they saw me as a reflection of their success or failure, she saw me as a person with my own path. As the weeks passed, the barrage of messages from my family gradually slowed. Then my mother tried a new strategy. She called one afternoon and invited me to Sunday dinner as if nothing had happened. We've all been under stress, she said. Let's put this unpleasantness behind us and move forward as a family. I stared out the window as she spoke, watching rain streak down the glass. I'm not ready for that, I said. Oh, Cher. There was the sigh. The disappointed one. What happened was not a simple misunderstanding, I continued. It was a calculated attempt to take something that rightfully belongs to me. I need time to process that betrayal. You've always been so dramatic, she said. Family disagreements happen. You need to learn to forgive and forget. This was not a disagreement, Mom. It was an organized campaign to defraud me of my property. It included lies, pressure, threats, and emotional blackmail. That is not something I can forget over Sunday pot roast. The conversation ended badly. But for the first time, I did not feel guilty after hanging up. I felt stronger. In the past, I would have given in. I would have agreed to move on without resolution. I would have accepted their version of reality over my own experience just to keep the peace. Not anymore. Meanwhile, I began spending more time at Grandma's house. My house. I cleared out the guest room I had used as a teenager and started staying there several nights a week. The commute to my office was longer, but the peace I felt inside those walls was worth every extra mile. I tended the garden the way Grandma had taught me. I watched the perennials push through the soil in their eternal cycle of return. I cooked in her kitchen, slept beneath quilts she had sewn by hand, sat in the sunroom where I had once studied for the bar exam and let myself remember that I had always been capable. Sometimes, I sat on the porch swing at dusk and imagined what Grandma would say if she were sitting beside me. I could almost hear her voice. "You stood your ground, sure. You honored yourself and you honored me. That is all I ever wanted for you." In those moments, despite the family rupture, despite the grief, despite the painful truth of what my parents had tried to do, I felt peace. The house was not just property. It was a sanctuary, a place where I could finally see myself clearly, free from the distorted mirrors my family had held up to me for so long. The journey was not over. There would be more confrontations, more attempts at manipulation, more painful realizations about the family I had spent my life trying to belong to. But for the first time, I felt equipped to face it all on my own terms. Grounded in truth, grounded in law, grounded in the love my grandmother had given me. As spring turned to summer, Grandma's garden bloomed in vibrant colors. Life continues, I thought, even after storms try to uproot it. Just like the perennials she loved, I was finding my way back to the light. 6 months passed. Seasons changed. And with them, my life transformed in ways I never could have predicted. The Victorian house that had been the center of so much conflict was now truly my home. After a lot of thought, I sold my downtown apartment and moved permanently into Grandma's house. The commute was longer, yes, but it felt like a small price to pay for waking up every morning surrounded by memories of the woman who had shown me what unconditional love felt like. The first weeks after the confrontation had been the hardest. The silence from my family was deafening, interrupted only by occasional messages designed to guilt me or minimize what had happened. "Can't we put this behind us? You're tearing the family apart over bricks and mortar. Your grandmother would have wanted peace." Each message reinforced my decision to keep distance. At first, the solitude hurt. Dysfunctional or not, they were still my family. Their absence left a strange emptiness, one that echoed through the rooms of the house at night. There were moments when I questioned myself. Had I been too harsh? Too unbending? Had I chosen a house over people? Whenever doubt crept in, I opened Grandma's letter and read it again. "This house has sheltered 4 generations of strong women. Now it will shelter you, my dear Sher, as you continue to forge your own path." And slowly, I began to heal. Therapy helped me untangle the web of family dynamics that had shaped me. I learned to recognize manipulation while it was happening instead of hours later. I learned that guilt was not always a sign I had done something wrong. Sometimes it was a sign I had broken an old pattern. I began to understand that the problem had never been me. Not my choices. Not my career. Not my personality. Not my refusal to become the daughter they had scripted. The problem was my parents' inability to see me as separate from their expectations. As I worked through those realizations, I poured my energy into reclaiming the house as my own. I painted the sunroom a warm yellow that glowed even on gray mornings. I refinished the hardwood floors that had been hidden beneath carpet for decades. I updated the kitchen while carefully preserving the vintage details Grandma had loved. I repaired the porch swing, replaced cracked tiles, restored the old brass fixtures, and filled the rooms with pieces that felt like both memory and beginning. Each change was intentional. Each one said, "This space is mine now." Not because I stole it, not because I won, because it was given to me in love, and I had chosen to honor that love. The garden became my sanctuary, just as it had been hers. Following Grandma's carefully kept garden journal, I planted the varieties she had loved most, then added a few of my own. Lavender near the walkway, white hydrangeas by the fence, herbs in clay pots along the kitchen steps. There was something profoundly healing about working the soil, watching seeds become stems, watching bare branches leaf again, watching life move in cycles of growth, rest, loss, and return. I began building a new life around me. The neighbors who had known Grandma welcomed me with casseroles, stories, and garden advice. Some still called me Elaine's girl. And for once, I did not mind being connected to someone else's name. I invited colleagues over for dinner in the dining room where I had once done homework while Grandma cooked. I joined the local historical society she had loved, helping preserve the stories and buildings that made the neighborhood special. And most significantly, I started a small scholarship fund in her name for law students from difficult family backgrounds. The Elaine Warren Resilience Scholarship would not change the world, but maybe it could change one student's life. Maybe it could give someone else the belief and support Grandma had given me. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a letter from Stephanie. Not a text, not an angry message. A letter. I recognized her handwriting immediately, but I still stared at the envelope for several minutes before opening it. Inside, her words were different from anything she had sent before. "I owe you an apology," she wrote. "I was so caught up in my own problems that I never stopped to consider what the house meant to you, or that what Mom and Dad were asking me to participate in was wrong. Since everything happened, I've been doing a lot of thinking about our family and the way we have always treated you. It was not fair, and I am sorry for my part in it." She explained that she had found an apartment she could afford. She and Amanda were settling in. She had begun seeing a therapist to understand the family patterns she had participated in and benefited from. "I am not asking for forgiveness," she wrote near the end. "I just want you to know that watching you stand up for yourself made me look at things differently." I read the letter several times. It was not a magical reconciliation. It did not erase the betrayal, but it was a start, a small acknowledgement of truths that had been denied for too long. I wrote back. I thanked her for the apology. I told her I was glad she and Amanda were safe and settling into their new place. I said I was not ready to rebuild our relationship yet, but I hoped that one day, if we both did the work, we might create something healthier than what we had inherited. My parents were another story. My father made one final attempt at intimidation, sending a certified letter threatening legal action if I did not return the house to the family. My response, drafted with Jackie's help, was brief and devastating. I included copies of the emails Martin had provided, showing their long-standing plan to defraud me. After that, my father went silent. My mother occasionally sent cards on holidays or my birthday. She never acknowledged what happened. She never apologized. She wrote cheerful little notes as if we were simply busy people who had drifted apart. I returned the gifts she sent, but I kept the cards in a box. I could not throw them away. I also could not pretend that her denial was love. The hardest lesson was accepting that family does not always mean unconditional support. Sometimes family relationships are the most conditional ones of all. Sometimes belonging is offered only in exchange for obedience. Sometimes love is measured by how much of yourself you are willing to surrender. Recognizing that truth hurt, but it also freed me. I could finally stop trying to earn approval that would never be freely given. Stop bending myself into shapes that pleased people who never intended to see me clearly. Stop mistaking peacekeeping for love. Instead, I focused on building relationships rooted in mutual respect. Friends who had stood beside me through the crisis. Colleagues who covered my caseload when I needed time. Neighbors who welcomed me without asking me to prove my worth. These people became my chosen family. Not bound by blood, but by care, honesty, and choice. 6 months to the day after the confrontation, I hosted a garden party. The peonies were in full bloom. The weather was perfect. The house looked more beautiful than ever, alive with laughter, music, food, and conversation. As I watched my guests move through the garden Grandma had planted, I felt her presence so strongly it almost brought me to tears. Not like a ghost, like a blessing, like approval, like love still living in the soil, the wood, the walls, and in me. Later, after twilight fell and the last guest left, I sat alone on the porch swing. The old chains creaked softly. Crickets sang in the grass. The house settled around me with familiar sounds that felt like breathing. The pain had not disappeared completely. Grief for the family I had lost, or perhaps the family I never truly had, would always be part of me. But beside that, grief was something stronger. Peace. I had honored my grandmother's legacy. I had protected my own worth. The house stood solid around me, sheltering me just as it had sheltered generations of women before me. And in protecting it, I had learned to protect myself. In fighting for what was rightfully mine, I discovered a strength I had carried all along. Sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we are born into. My grandmother taught me to stand tall in the face of injustice. And in honoring her home, I finally learned to honor myself. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? Share your story in the comments below. If this story of setting boundaries, protecting your peace, and finding strength moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is say no to people who refuse to respect your boundaries. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to protect what matters most.